Like, what is so good about it, and why is that under threat?
Please don't hack our websites. Please don't do that.
So they kept the same code and they just said this now belongs to us rather than them. Is that legal? Like, are they allowed to do that? It's like it almost has this illusion of it being free.
As this becomes less important, then this also makes it weaker as a platform.
How would that affect a site's SEO though?
They don't care. Google doesn't care, you know?
His exact words were, they're a cancer. What if everything you thought you knew about WordPress was wrong? After powering nearly half the internet for well over a decade now, WordPress might be facing its biggest crisis yet. And it's not the drama you've been hearing about. Behind closed doors, major website builders are quietly abandoning the platform. And after building thousands of pages on WordPress across dozens of websites, we're finally beginning to ask the question, have we reached the point where some of WordPress's competitors are just better all-around products? In this episode, we break down why major platforms like Webflow are gaining ground, reveal the hidden costs of WordPress that nobody really talks about, and show you exactly how to future-proof your website strategy. Plus, we'll share a clever way to transition away from WordPress without rebuilding your entire site. So whether you're managing a single website or running an agency, this episode will transform how you think about building on the web. This is the Authority Hacker Podcast.
Welcome to the Authority Hacker Podcast. And now, your hosts, Gail Breton and Mark Webster.
All right, welcome back to the Authority Hacker Podcast. I'm excited for this one today, Gail, because I feel like I'm going to learn a lot because I don't know how many people know this, but I don't really know shit about building websites.
You've been talking a lot about building websites for how much you know. That's all I want to say.
From a purely technical perspective, right? You're the WordPress tinkerer in the company, right?
Yeah, and it's like you know, like for example, like our sales pages, they've been quite like big projects and so on, and we've gone a little bit further than just building simple blogs and so on. We built entire sales funnels on WordPress, and so I think I'm pretty okay at it. Like I'm not a full designer and developer, but I think that's what makes it interesting, because when you talk to a designer or developer, they use kind of like super advanced tools that you would probably never want to use. Whereas I think I'm kind of like still a marketer, but like someone that can actually, you know, be a little bit dangerous with all that stuff to actually make stuff that makes people essentially swipe their credit card, which is always a good thing.
And importantly, you're not a coder, right? You know some basic HTML, CSS, but like really not much.
I know AI now, but I guess that counts. But yeah, it's like I like to build things visually. Like if I need to get like a line or two of CSS to change things, like it's okay. Like I can handle that. And especially with this AI now, you literally just give a screenshot and be like, write the CSS to change this. It's not so difficult. But I don't write PHP. I don't write custom plugins. I don't do any of that. And I still get by.
I think a lot of people listening will be in a similar position, right? They're business owners rather than developers. But yeah, you know, you've been building websites now for 14, 15 years. So when you tell me,
I've learned to code, you know,
you tell me you're actively looking for alternatives to WordPress. It's kind of like hearing a diehard iPhone user say they're considering switching to Android. I mean, what has changed recently?
Okay, well, there's really two main things. First of all, you know, I talked about like building sales pages and so on. And it's like we use GenerateBlocks historically, which is essentially like kind of a page builder built into Gutenberg, which is the default page builder in WordPress. Like that's how you build your pages, which is very good, right? It's like it's honestly elevating the capabilities a lot to the point where you can make complex sales pages if you want to, etc. But still, like, you know, if I wanted to make a sales page that looks like an Apple sales page, there would need to be a lot of custom code, for example, because there's a lot of like animations that you can do. There's a lot of like transition effects. And like when you get to the more advanced stuff and you want to make your stuff look as sleek as possible, then you kind of hit a bit of a wall with Gutenberg in general. Gutenberg in general as well, when you build big pages for sales or for like your homepage or something, it gets slow. Like it just like it lags. And it's like, quite often I click on an element and it's like it takes 2-3 seconds for it to actually select and I can actually start doing something.
And this gets worse with like big long form sales pages like we have for some of our core sales
homepage,
pages.
Like a big homepage or something like that. Like for simple blog posts, it's not really an issue. So like I still think Gutenberg is the best option for blogging. I think it's the best editor. that out of all the alternatives we'll talk about today. But like when you start making essentially more commercial websites and trying to sell stuff to people, then you're getting limited if you stick to Gutenberg. At least there are options on WordPress that allow you to go past what you can do with Gutenberg, and we'll probably talk about that. But yeah, that's the first reason I've been looking at alternatives. The second one is another frustration of mine is that, yeah, WordPress, there's a million plugins and a million things you can do with it. But the problem is there's often issues and bugs with things kind of like clashing with each other, loading too much code, slowing down, etc. So then you kind of end up making like very aggressive caching solutions. If you do aggressive caching solutions, then you can't really do A/B testing because it's caching one of the versions of the A/B test. And then like a lot of things kind of like clash with each other. And it's like, while it's incredible, the ecosystem that there is in WordPress, it's hard to, like, you kind of have to figure it out because almost nobody has the same stack as you have, which means there's also very little documentation and there's no support around as well. So it's a lot of figuring stuff out and debugging and days of frustration, which I'm getting a bit tired of, to be honest.
And I'm sure most people listening to this podcast who have a WordPress site will have encountered the problem where something stops working, a plugin stops working, they go to the support and the support say, oh, it's the fault of some other plugin, theme, whatever. And then they all end up blaming each other and it's nobody's fault. And you're left stuck trying to figure out how the hell do I get my site working again?
Yeah, and then you just end up having to pay some kind of either service that provides customer support for WordPress because WordPress is free, so they're not going to help you out, or you pay a developer. It can end up being quite expensive to solve this stuff. Whereas other solutions, especially like kind of like closed code ones, they do have customer support. Like I'll show you Webflow, for example. They literally have a chatbot that is trained on their documentation that you can query within the builder, things like that. So it's like there's like a lot of like cool little things that essentially save you time, and that's kind of nice. And when you get to the point where you say have aggressive caching to make up for all the plugins kind of like loading all the stuff you don't want, and then you want to A/B test and then it doesn't work, etc. It's like you have to rethink your whole setup, and that's kind of the point that I reached on a lot of our stuff, and that prevented us from essentially improving. And just instead we were battling with tech, which has been a bit frustrating for me. So that's kind of like the two main technical reasons. Then there's a third one that's more of how to say, like a political one. Let's just say that.
This is the WordPress WP Engine drama from last year, right?
So it's kind of like, I mean, yeah, there's that. It's like, it's a problem to me. Basically what happened
Do you want to just, go through what happened so people who haven't been keeping up with it are aware?
So there was a WordPress conference. I think it's like their main conference. And then there's the CEO of Automatic who owns WordPress. WordPress is open source, but it's owned by a private company that essentially started just hating on WP Engine because they, like, a lot of people believe they're part of WordPress when they're not, and he just says they don't contribute enough to the code base, which, you know, when there's an open source project and you're essentially profiting from it, is kind of expected. So that's kind of like
I believe his exact words were they're a cancer to WordPress.
All right, maybe I'm minimizing a bit.
This was because they were apparently disabling core WordPress features like revision tracking. Which,
maybe behind
I don't know, this doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but especially considering this is open source. But yeah, clearly he wasn't very happy with it at all. And this led to some more significant blowback, right?
Yeah, so it's like following that, I can't remember, but like WP Engine wasn't happy, and then this guy essentially has full control over the WordPress project, right? It's like it's
just
one person,
one guy, like,
he has all the power.
Unchecked. Okay.
He has all the, if he's like, fuck this, then he can shut down WordPress.org. Like, it can be forked, like someone can take the code base, etc. But the current version of the project, he has full control over it. And what he did, and particularly what he has control over, is the plugin directory. So you know how in WordPress, when you want to install a plugin, you have this little section, you go type your plugin name, and then essentially like you can go and find out. He blocked that on the WP Engine, so nobody could install a plugin that was using WP Engine.
Did that also block security updates on WP Engine?
Maybe, I'm not sure. There's a good chance it might have. Not only that, but WP Engine owns a very popular plugin called Advanced Custom Fields, which essentially just allows.
We use that on our site, right?
Everyone uses that, honestly. Like if you want to add like any fields to any blog post page, etc., to like then pull it inside the page, you're probably using that. That's what we're using, and so that is owned by WP Engine. that keeps a really good free version out there that you don't need to pay for. There's a paid version if you want, but most people don't need it. And so WordPress just decided to just take over that plugin and called it Secure Custom Field. And essentially, whenever you were updating your plugin within WordPress, they just took over. They basically took over the code base, and this is their plugin now. Basically, they
kept the same code, and they just said this now belongs to us rather than them. Is that legal? Like, are they allowed to do that?
Well, the judges will tell you because they're in the legal battle right now. So I can't tell you whether that's legal or not.
To be clear, then did we pay for ACF before?
Yeah, we have the pro version. I think about a Black Friday one, 3-4 years ago. Something.
And so does that mean now that we have secure custom fields, which is their renamed version, without having actively decided to switch?
I haven't updated yet, actually. So it's kind of like something I need to decide. But so far, I haven't pressed the update button. And so far, it's still running. And I'm kind of waiting to see how it turns out. We can't wait too long, though. A year in, I'll be uncomfortable not updating this for security reasons.
Yeah.
So it's like we're kind of in this flow. Please don't hack our websites. Please don't do that. But yeah, that's something we're dealing with right now, and a lot of people are dealing with. All of that to say, I don't really care for their drama. But what matters to me is more like the message this sends to the industry in general, right? A lot of companies invest heavily into building WordPress plugins. Like think about Elementor, think about the guys at WP Beginner and that owns all WordPress plugins like WP Forms, etc., Opt-in Monster, etc. And so these people are now seeing a private company that essentially spent a lot of resources building WordPress plugins and building their company around WordPress, being singled out by the guy who has full control over the platform and essentially having their business hijacked. And that sends a very, very, very bad signal in terms of investment. Like if I come to you today and I'm like, let's build a WordPress plugin, and then you see that, and then there's a chance they call you cancer of WordPress for branding yourself in a certain way and start blocking access to core features to your customers. Would you be confident building a WordPress plugin?
Yeah, it's like the lack of stability. You need stability in order to build a business and invest in the future, and this takes away that stability. I think it's especially worse, though, because so many websites and plugins have the name WP or WordPress or something similar in it, right? You mentioned WP Beginners, big site, but honestly, so many WordPress plugins have the word WP in it, and this was a big issue that Mullenweg and the team at Automatic had with them. They filed some kind of copyright thing for using WP or WordPress in the name of their hosting packages, or it's all seemed a little bit petty.
It's kind of bullshit, yeah. Honestly, it's just a lot of people do that. It's just WP Engine makes a lot of money. I think it's they make 400 million per year SR on threads or something. They're doing well for hosting, and they might be making more money than Automatic with WordPress. And I think that kind of triggered them a little bit because of that. But then the result is that a lot of people essentially quit the companies and just a lot of drama, a lot of instability, people not sure to invest. So it's you can expect kind of a slowdown of the WordPress ecosystem as a result of that, less progress and essentially other platforms taking over. And I want to show you something actually. So 1 second, I'm going to show you some interesting usage statistics. So let me share my screen right now. Can you see it?
Yep.
And I'm going to describe it.
For those people, listening, let's talk through it.
We're going to describe it. So this is a site called builtwith.com that essentially just tracks kind of popular technologies and their usage over time. And you can see this is WordPress we're looking at right now. And you can see between 2000 and 2021, something like that, something like that, mid of 2021, it's been growing very fast, right? Especially for the top 1 million sites, which is essentially the big guys, but also for the smaller sites, top 100K sites, it's been growing a lot. But since 2021, we're basically stalled for growth. This platform is not growing anymore. It's something that
2021 was before.
That was before the drama. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's something else going on here.
Well, the stuff I talked about, compatibility issues, alt text, slow, difficult to use, etc. All this other stuff was there. But all I'm saying is this drama comes at a point where the growth was stalled already quite a bit. And so it's quite likely that I don't think WordPress is gonna fall. It's kind of like Google, right? It's I don't think Google's gonna fall. I don't think WordPress is gonna fall. But the momentum is not here anymore, and that gives opportunity for other platforms. So if you check like Shopify, for example, that's what the Shopify growth looks like, and look at the graph. Like, you know, the scale is not the same, right? 2021 is essentially in the middle of my screen if you're seeing, but they went from 17,500 of the top 10K size to almost 30,000. So we're talking almost double the size by the time, like in the same time that WordPress was sold. Same with Webflow. It doesn't look super fancy, but again, the scale is not the same. 2021 is here, actually like it's somewhere here, which is 6,250, and they went to like over 10,000. So like that's another 30-40% growth for the platforms. Just to say that these other platforms are slowly kind of like, taking small bites at the market share, while WordPress is mostly stalling during that time frame, actually. And that shows a shift in momentum for me.
And now for a quick word from this episode's sponsor, Digital.pr. They've just launched the world's first subscription-based digital PR service that makes premium 100% white hat link building accessible to anyone. Through a mix of reactive PR, expert commentary, and data-driven campaigns, they guarantee a minimum of 5 to 20 high-quality links from top-tier publications every quarter. And this is not some shot-in-the-dark approach. It's backed by Search Intelligence's proven track record, and is made possible by the world's largest digital PR team, now accessible at the click of a button. Unlike traditional agencies that require huge retainers, Digital.pr offers transparent monthly plans starting now from just £700 per month. That means no long-term commitments and no hidden fees, just guaranteed results. So if you want to level up your link building without breaking the bank, head over to Digital.pr and join the revolution that's making premium digital PR accessible to everyone. And now back to the episode. So I looked up some numbers, and WordPress is still currently used by about 43% of the internet, which is a colossal number, right? Considering how many websites there are out there. Can you just explain though, like, why do people use WordPress? Like, what is so good about it, and why is that under threat?
I think, and that's another argument I want to make later, is like, first of all, it's free, right? It's free and open source. So you essentially are told that you don't need to pay for this, unlike other platforms. And you're also told that you can build on top of it, and you're free to tweak it however you want. But my counter argument that I want to develop in this podcast is actually WordPress is almost more expensive to run now than these other platforms because of all the extra tools you need to buy and how much they cost. As I said, like, plugins conflict with each other. Like, page builders are not free. GenerateBlocks is a yearly subscription. Bricks is a yearly subscription. Elementor is a yearly subscription. But then if you want to add some caching, let's say you take WP Rocket, that's another yearly subscription. And there's a lot of tools that you kind of add up on top, and it ends up being, you need to pay for your hosting. I forgot to say about that, but hosting is not free. And so, when you add up all these things, I think the prices are like not that far anymore. So it's like, well, it looks cheaper initially, and it may be cheaper in some cases, depending on the kind of site you're building. In many cases, the price is quite comparable to what I would call like more modern platforms right now that give you more opportunities.
It's like it almost has this illusion of it being free, but it's just that one open source bit that's free, and everything else you kind of need to run your site is
and it's often more expensive than the alternative. Like, everyone's on the subscription now. Like, there used to be a lot of plugins that you pay one-off for, etc. That's really not a thing anymore. Everything's on the sub. And so, like, if you need like 5, 6, 7, 10 plugins to run your website, you're basically running 10 subscriptions between $29 and let's say $99 a year, per plugin. But it plus your hosting, that I would say maybe like decent hosting is like, let's say $30 a month to start from. Like, it kind of adds up. And so I think also the reason it's so popular is because just a lot of people learn with it. Like, WordPress is so old at this point. The community is huge, but a lot more people are starting to look at alternatives right now. And there's one thing we didn't talk about, by the way. One thing is WordPress is a blogging platform, right? It's very good at blogging initially. You can build all kind of websites, but it's really, the CMS is really kind of like the best part of it. And blogging is just like falling out of fashion a little bit right now. It's just not a thing that's as important in terms of building a website as it is. Like, the place of the website in the funnel is changing. Like, a lot of people now create content on social media, and people go on the website to convert, basically. Like, they click on the whatever. Like they might come from Google, but they might also come from social. They might come from other places. And you're kind of like building sleeker, smaller sites at this point while creating a lot of your content outside your website. Even if like SEO is not completely dead or whatever, it's just less powerful and you kind of like diversify.
The shift in importance moves away from the posts, if you're thinking in like WordPress language, to the pages.
Yeah, and it's like, it was very important that the CMS was powerful, which gave WordPress a really strong advantage because the CMS is still the best, I think, for WordPress. But as this becomes less important, then this also makes it weaker as a platform.
Okay, so can you talk us through some of the typical kind of like WordPress backend experience that you have in your daily workflow, and then how that compares to some of the alternatives? You mentioned Webflow, and I know there's a few others that we've been looking at. So maybe we do like a screen share comparison or something here.
We're gonna do that. I actually prepared a little bit. Give me a sec. So you should be seeing my screen now. We're gonna describe everything we do. If you're listening to the audio, don't worry. But basically, I'm gonna show you how I edit, like let's say a sales page on Authority Hacker. That's why I wanted to show you what this looks like. So this is one of our sales pages. And that's what it looks like inside Gutenberg. So you can see everything is built inside Gutenberg. On the left, I have essentially all the elements. I remember when we prepared the podcast, you were asking me what is a div, which I was like slightly ashamed of. A div is a container.
You questioned me and what an API was. Like I kind of know what it roughly does, but like div, what does it stand for?
I don't even know. I don't know what it stands for. What I can tell you is it's a container, basically. It's a box that you put things in. So, but like, yeah, that's the Gutenberg experience. On the left, you have your outline. Most people have it triggered off. I always have it on because it just makes it easier to select elements. And on the right, you have your styling panel. And the one that you are seeing on my screen is essentially the GenerateBlocks one, which has a lot more options than you may have in the free Gutenberg blocks.
We've got sizing, spacing, borders, typography, colors, backgrounds. Yeah. So lots of options there. And within those, we can customize basically anything. I mean, this is pretty, would you say advanced or complex?
For Gutenberg, it's pretty advanced. Compared to what I'm going to show you on Webflow, it's pretty basic.
Okay.
So it's like, it really depends how you're looking at things. And basically the way you build your web page is like, I think the menu is a good example. You basically build a block, like you can see I have my container selected here. And inside, like I have the links for the menu here, which are buttons, right? Mm-hmm. And then I basically have rules here, like you can see flex, like they're set as a row, but if I set them as a column, you see they essentially move as a column, right? So I essentially choose, and I can choose how much space there is between elements. So like you see if I change the spacing, and that's kind of how you lay stuff out on your page. So you put containers, you put things in the container, and you put rules in the containers, and then you style the elements. That's basically building a page. The problem is like, actually it's not too bad now because I haven't really worked on the page, but you can see, for example, like you see how this looks super wide. The Gutenberg the editor doesn't really reflect exactly what you see in the front end. So you can see, for example, this text is like taking all the space on my page. But if you actually go on the page on the website, it doesn't look like that at all.
And so you have to kind of keep toggling between the preview or the live version of the site and what you see in the editor to see what you've actually changed. Yeah, it's like close enough. What you see is what you get.
It's close enough, like you get a visual representation of your page, but you can see like essentially like it can be glitchy. So that's essentially what editing a sales page is like. And so all these back and forth. After working like 45 minutes on this page, like clicking on this image, like now it selects immediately, but it would take me like 2-3 seconds sometimes to select. For some reason, it just slows down, mostly because behind the scene, WordPress is very old tech. But yeah, that's pretty much the experience. And if I wanted to make like fancy animations, etc., it's kind of possible with GenerateBlocks, but the possibilities are quite limited.
When you say fancy animations, like describe that.
Okay, so let's say we go on apple.com and I'll show you what a fancy animation. Let's go like the new MacBook Pro, let's say, on the sales page. So like you see what happens when I load the page? It's not like everything loaded instantly. Like things kind of like slowly appear.
Yeah, there's kind of like the heading slowly lit up as the image.
And as I'm loading the page,
you
see things are happening, you know? Like you get something that's a little bit sleeker.
It's almost, you almost feel like the background is kind of like stuck and you're like scrolling down the text rather than scrolling all the way down a canvas as you are in most
So like you could do some of this with the setup we have, but it would be quite challenging, and especially as you don't see it in real time, etc. Like you don't have a lot of control, basically. So that's where we kind of get limited, and it's like our sales pages don't look nearly like an Apple sales page, and it just frustrates me, to be honest. And so like that's one of the reasons. It's good enough, but people expect good design now. Like that's kind of your credibility, you know.
So what are the alternatives let us do then?
So the one I've been talking about is Webflow. I mean, let's talk about WordPress first, right? So no, let's talk about Webflow. Actually, I changed my mind. The reason why is because you need to see Webflow before you see the alternative on WordPress, so you can compare it to each other. So this is the editor in Webflow. So you see, it's not that different, right? It's like, actually, look, if I do it like this, you have your layout on the left.
Same div tags at the left containers, and we've got a bunch of configurable items on the right with size, position, typography. Yeah, spacing, same things.
Very similar, right? It just looks a little bit maybe slicker, looks a bit more like Photoshop or something. The difference is this is my preview, and this is my live site. The only thing that has changed is the animation. Other than that, it looks the same, and I didn't have to load a different page to actually see my preview. You see, I just click on that button. It just does it immediately. What changes as well is you have like much more, let's say, like, you know, let's say we want to do these fancy animations, right? It's like you can actually do an element trigger and like, let's say on a mouse click, and you can do like start an animation, and then you can create an animation, and then you select like you want it to scale, but like you can actually have a timeline on the per half second, etc. Exactly what happens. So like it goes a little bit deeper. You can do more things, but most importantly, this is all one platform, which means like I'm not fighting between my page builder and WordPress and all these things, etc. Everything's in one platform. Everything is as I see it, and as a result, I'm not like what I'm seeing is always what I'm getting because there's no conflicts. Basically, like everything's under one platform, which makes it easier.
It feels like a bit more responsive, a bit more like quick to do things on here. Like it's loading instantly.
Yep, there's a lot, and for example, I mean, I could go quite deep, but like for example, like here you can set your brand colors, and then whenever you style something, you can actually, let me go in the style, you can go grab your brand color so you have like uniformity. So if I go in the, like, let's say this is the background, if I set the blue, I get all this, like there's kind of like
and
a
then if you change it later, it changes everywhere.
We can do it now actually. Like, you know, let's say I change this color and I change it to like a darker blue, for example. Normally, see the blue has changed on the page automatically. So these are things that you can do a little bit in GenerateBlocks, but this is more pushed here. And there's essentially like a full design system that you can control within one place, which allows you to be more branded and essentially build things easier. So yeah, overall, just it's faster to build things. I'm not gonna go through all the features, but yeah, like you know, this is, you can see this little green thing on my screen means that if I edit this navbar here, my entire site navbar changed, and I don't have to load another page on WordPress to change my navigation or something. I see it in the context of the page I'm building. I double click on it. I'm editing this. My entire navbar is changing. That's pretty cool, basically. So
it's kind of like if someone had designed WordPress today, it would probably look more like this.
It feels much more in line with that. Whereas WordPress, like, you know, let's say we're on this page, like I want to change the navbar. In this case, like it's built in, but like I would need to go through like 3 different pages to even be able to the point where I can edit my navbar, for example. Yeah. Same with my footer, same with everything, which, yeah, it's just faster. Like it's just like building things is faster, it's more intuitive. Like let's say if I want to like add some padding, for example, like I can click here and then, in this case it's fixed, but let me just take this one, for example, this headline. And if I, of course, when I do it, it doesn't work. Yeah, you see, I can just literally visually drag and drop things, and things move.
Oh, that's cool. It's got a little ruler on it with
I can see exactly how I'm doing things, etc.
Wow, interesting.
And then same, like you want to see what it looks like on mobile, horizontal. Like you click on it, immediately it goes there. If I go on WordPress and I do the same thing, I don't know how quick it's gonna go. Look at the speed. I'm waiting still. And it's like, and that was fast. That's without working on it. But like, it's just like it's much easier.
No, it's nice to use. Is there a harder learning curve though for Webflow?
The options are the same. So like a lot of the stuff you can see, like let me go back to WordPress on desktop. But like essentially, if you're using something like GenerateBlocks, if you're using something like Bricks, it's quite similar because essentially these are CSS rules, right? It's like it's just the underlying rules that are in the code. And you can see, you know, we have our margin, our padding here, for example, the borders, etc. If I go back in Webflow, I have the same thing. I have the essentially margins are around, the padding are inside, And then, you know, I can do the borders. Like I can actually, like this is a bit overwhelming, but there's actually a focus mode, and then you can just see it like that. And if I go in borders, I have the same options. So a lot of the stuff is the same. You don't have to relearn what is what. You might just have to learn the new stuff you didn't have access to on WordPress. But that's not too bad. And let's talk about price for a sec. Like you know, again, this, like, I'm like, oh, private website thing is going to be expensive, etc. You know, a basic website plus hosting plus CDN with 150 pages, 10 GB bandwidth is not a lot, by the way, but I was checking for like $20 a month, so you can add another 50 GB, which would be a lot. That's $14 per month. That's including hosting, that's including your page builder, that's including your CDN, right? And then if
that's the yearly monthly price for a year.
Yeah, monthly price is 18.
Month, okay, that's not too much of an
That's
increase.
not terrible. Like, just for comparison, right? I have like a WordPress add-on thing opened. Like, this is a decent WordPress hosting. It's not the most expensive. Like, WP Engine would cost much more. The first hosting package
This is rocket.net.
Yeah.
You're looking at.
The first hosting package starts at $30 per month, and you have no page builder. You do have the CDN, etc. But and then you have 50 GB. So it's quite similar in price, basically, for like the basic setup, except you have a lot more tools built in there. Like, you have all your caching, you have all of that. It's all done, basically. So just talking about pricing, it's not bad, but they can kind of get you. So, like, for example, they charge you for adding team members. So, like, if you want to add like a team member that can edit the content, that's like another $15 per month, etc. So it really depends on your setup. But overall, I haven't found it worse than it is with WordPress when you have a good setup and you have essentially premium plugins. Just talking about animations, I actually prepared some sites that are built on Webflow. So you can see, for example, like that's the kind of site that's built on Webflow, basically.
This is coframe.com. Yeah, I mean, this looks pretty slick.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You would not think this is built on WordPress. Like, yeah, I would think this would be pretty difficult to do on there.
Yeah, and then you can essentially, that's why you can kind of get to an extra level of thickness. But there's also something that's interesting for me is speed. And there's a tool that I wanted to show you. I don't know if we have time, but I wanted to show you how I'm using that. Basically, it's called Relume.io. And
Relume.io, yeah.
And what you do is you say, let's say, I want to make a site for a dog trainer that also offers dog boarding, let's say. And then you just describe what you want. And it's just going to actually generate a sitemap for you, but it's not just going to generate a sitemap with page ideas. It's going to generate a sitemap with essentially, you know, what section should be in the sitemap. So it did the homepage now, for example. So it said, hey, you need a navbar, a hero section, 3 feature section, a testimonial, a services section, and a footer. And it also brainstormed that you might need an about us page. You might need a services page and then dog training and dog boarding page, right? So it's actually...
I presume this is all done through AI, right?
Yeah. So AI kind of brainstorm that. So like, you're like, okay, that's cool. Like, whatever. But then you go to wireframe, the next step, and look at it. It actually pre-builds your website like instantly. All of this is importable in one click into Webflow. And all of this also
just works with Webflow. Is this a like official Webflow tool, or
no? It's a third-party tool, but there's a one-click upload. So like I could one-click upload this to a new site on Webflow. Not only that, but it's all responsive by default. Every single widget is responsive by default. And let's say I don't like this section, I can actually click on replace component, and it just gives me alternatives to actually change the design. And they have like hundreds of different designs, for example.
So this is kind of like an AI theme builder for WordPress in a way, right?
With a bit more control and a lot more refined. Like they have like all these animated stuff, etc. as well, if you wanted it. Like it's a bit more designed. But like not only that, so like let's say you do that, but you can actually double click. You can double click and change the copy. For example, it could be like trust us with your dog, for example. Like you can start.
You can ask AI to help you with that. I see.
Yeah, but that's basic copy. I don't think that's super impressive. The point is like you can get close enough to like, okay, in this section I say this, in this section I say that. Like brainstorming a sales page for me makes it so much easier. You can add sections between the two. So let's say we want to add some kind of like benefits, for example. Then we can scroll through and pick something that's a little bit fancy. So let's scroll down. But maybe I pick this benefit section and bam, 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 it's here. I can double click. I can change my copy, but it goes one step further. Now they have this style guide where essentially, look, they actually started designing the page and picking your brand colors, etc. And I can just change the brand colors if I want. So let's say I want the color to be maybe some more brown for like a dog, something like that. Let's say something like that. Then I've changed my brand color to brown. And then let's say like this about me section, I can, I'm gonna hold the shift here and I'm making it like my brown brand color, for example. And so you can essentially start designing these things with your fonts, your colors, etc. And then in one click, it goes to Webflow and you finish it.
So it's really taking a lot of separate processes that you would do when designing a website, going to sites like Coolers to pick your color palette and also doing it all in one, and like instantly you're able to apply that to your site.
Yeah. And so like it makes building a page like way faster, because also like, I spent a lot of time making like a lot of things responsive on our site, etc., and pre-building things.
How much time, like when you build a sales page, what percentage of your time is spent on responsive work?
Between 1 and 1.5 days, maybe.
Okay.
So it's significant. When the sales page is finished on desktop, you basically spend, and it's not perfect. Like if you check our sales pages, they're okay on mobile, but these guys are better than me. So like there's also kind of like a skill thing that you can get, and this is like things like $30 a month. This tool, right? It's like it's not too bad, and you don't have to maintain it if you build your site on it. It's just to build. So you can
probably
buy
pretty good if you're designing websites for clients as well.
Yep, that's what people do it for. You can even share the concepts, so you can actually share with people. You can make multiple versions and do that. So all of that to say, I could one-click export this to Webflow. Like I'm not gonna do it now, but see, there's an export to Webflow, right? So I could move that to Webflow and then start editing in the builder that I showed you with essentially all the options, and make it mine, upload my images, etc. Basically. So all of that to say, it's kind of faster, easier, less laggy for the same price, but the CMS is not as good. Like that's the one thing that I would say. If I built a blog right now,
what are the specific weaknesses of it then?
It's just not very good. I don't even know if I have it on this test site. So you can see, for example, like these are blog posts and this is the text editor. That's pretty basic. So as long as you're doing like headlines, images, and text, it's fine. But as soon as you want to go further than that, I don't think I like it nearly as much as.
So if you're trying to insert like your typical affiliate comparison table,
I would not use
not really a way to do it. Okay.
Now there's a way, if it's not like it kills the price argument, but there's a WordPress plugin for Webflow, so you can build some pages on Webflow, let's say your homepage, your sales pages, etc., and make these fancy pages. And you could still use WordPress for your blog, for example. Like that's technically possible. But then you kind of still have to pay for hosting and a bunch of stuff for WordPress, and you also pay for Webflow. Arguably, you could take the cheap plan if it's only a few pages. So you're talking like, let's say you pay yearly $14 per month, which is not bad for sales pages, to be honest. But it's like, that's the one thing where I'm like, as soon as I need a blog, like I'll probably default back to WordPress, actually. So yeah, that's pretty much the one I've tried. Now I've showed you Webflow. I think we need to give a point back to WordPress and kind of like argue back, because there's a builder on WordPress that's very close to Webflow. And it's called Bricks. And I actually have a kind of like a test instance ready here. So that's the website called Bricks. The price, I think I have it. No, that's not. Let's check the price. I think the price is like $79 per year for one website. So again, like you're kind of adding subscription. Yeah. It's not bad, but just like you keep adding stuff, right? It's like you need much more than that to run WordPress. And it's a theme as well, which means if you already have built your site, you cannot use it. You need to kind of rebuild your site on it. It's a theme, not a page, not a plugin. And that's kind of like a big deal for a lot of people. But this is what it looks like. It looks like, again, kind of like a budget Webflow, except they've moved the content on the right. So you can see again, you have your divs, which are like essentially these boxes.
To me, it looks like Webflow, just the other way around. Yeah, they've switched the right and the left columns.
Yeah, and it's actually, you can see it's probably just as responsive as Webflow. So my arguments on slowness, etc., they kind of evaporate here when you.
But you're working on this within. I see the URL is bricksbuilder.io. It's like, would you be working within WordPress normally? Is this just a demo?
This is their test instance. Like I'm just on the site and I just made a test instance to show it. But you can see, like I can click on the image, but as soon as I open the media library, you're back in WordPress basically.
Got it.
But yeah, the options are quite similar, like in style, like again, typography, background, borders, etc. You can do all of that. You can reorder your elements by drag and dropping them, for example, and things move. So it's pretty good, even for like interactions, for example. I talked about these animations. I can do some animations here. It's not as good as Webflow, but I can do some of that stuff. And I can preview things in one click the same way I did on Webflow, basically. It's much closer to what you would get. So that would be the argument. The problem is like you're still on WordPress, which means like you're still dealing with all the plugin issues. You're still dealing with having to pay for a bunch of other tools on top, and you need to pay for your hosting. You need to manage that. You're gonna deal with compatibility issues and so on. But that is a pretty good tool. Now, if you wanted to bring it even closer to what I talked about in this Relume tool, right? There's actually tools that you can buy on WordPress that allow you to do that. So remember when I showed you the color stuff, for example, where I can change the color and change it everywhere, etc. Yeah. Well, there's a tool called like Automatic.css that does this for you. Let me go on the homepage.
Is this a relation to Automatic, the WordPress?
No, it's not. But they might be called cancer of WordPress again.
Interesting.
But yeah, these guys, you can see like you can set up your colors and swap them in seconds. So like if I click generate, you see it generates the colors. You can, the typography will like adapt to the size of your screen. Like it will do a lot of like CSS stuff that you would have built into Webflow, basically. And it's built directly into Bricks. You can see they have a video here where they show you the builder and they show you all this stuff. So it's pretty good, but you're adding another $79 per year for your site. And it's not affiliated with WordPress or Bricks. So again, they might clash at some point. There might be updates, etc. And the same guys actually offer something that's basically the exact same as Relume, which is like pre-built frames. Let me just find some examples.
Getframes.io is the website you're on.
Okay, so if you go to their like layout library, you can see it's quite similar to what you would see. Like you can essentially get this section that is already responsive, and you can bring it into your WordPress site inside Bricks, basically. So that allows you to have some of that. It's not as good as Relume. It doesn't have this kind of like builder and style, etc. before, but they have a lot of these kind of things that you can add in. And from what I'm seeing, they just copy Relume every time they release a new layout. These guys are the underdog, but all to say, like you could do all of that, but again, you're adding another something like $79 per year, $69 per year for your site, basically. And then you'll need also some kind of caching plugin, and you need all of that, etc. So yeah, like all of that to say, it's competitive. It's kind of like half-half.
If someone's not too worried about, $10 a month here, $10 a month there, like they're maybe fine with spending a couple $100 a month on their site. So like money is not the concern. Which one should they go with?
It really depends what you want to do. So for example, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, like I've been frustrated with caching against A/B testing. Like it's been really an issue. Like what happens is you cache your content aggressively, so it's loaded, let's say, on Cloudflare or something like this. And then when you run A/B testing, they just cache one of the variations and just serve that, basically. And the A/B test never kind of runs. It's possible to fix it. It's just a lot of exclusions, and you're battling with the system, basically. It's always complicated. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm looking to move a lot of our sales pages to Webflow. I might do it through the WordPress plugin. So it's like the way I'm seeing it is like probably we'll keep the blog on Gutenberg, and then we'll just get the cheap plan on Webflow, like the $14 per month, just for sales pages and homepage and about page, etc. Which 10 gigs of bandwidth is plenty for this. And that's probably the setup I would go for if you're still running a blog. If you're not running a blog, if you're running like an agency, if you're running a service business, if you're running anything like that, I would just go with Webflow because it's kind of like easier to do, and then use Relume to build the site quickly, basically. And then if you're running a blog, like WordPress is still the way. If you don't have a theme yet, Bricks is a decent alternative. If you are married to Gutenberg and that's what you want to use for everything, then GenerateBlocks is still the best way. But I kind of wanted to show, it really depends what you want to do. Like these days we're more into building essentially pages that impress people. And so Webflow is kind of like the tool to do that. Bricks is not far behind. And then, yeah, GenerateBlocks is the best Gutenberg page builder for me. But it's still quite a bit behind these other tools and quite a bit more challenging.
It sounds like it's a lot more nuanced now. Before the answer was just, go with WordPress. It's the best for basically everyone. But now that's no longer the case.
I'm not like, WordPress is over or whatever, but I'm also acknowledging that these other tools simplify a lot of things. Like one thing I'm really into these days is simplifying everything, spending less time to do the same thing. It's so important. Like you can always do everything, but it's just the question is how much time and money does it cost you? Websites get less and less traffic. It's just a fact. And then their role is changing in the funnel. They're still important, but they're much more of a place that people go to much later after they've known about you, etc. And so impressing them is important. These pages are very important for your revenue, but also they're not seen by many people. So I want to spend as little time as possible to get something as impressive as possible. And I want to be doing things like optimizing my conversions, which is why I'm talking about A/B testing all the time. And so for that, I'm definitely going to be building a lot more stuff on Webflow because it's cost efficient actually. Probably our site is going to stay on WordPress while few pages will be taken over by this. If I was building a WordPress site from scratch, though, Bricks would be good.
How would that affect a site's SEO, though?
It doesn't. Like you can still change in Bricks. In Webflow, you can change all the title tags and all that stuff, etc. And having multiple CMS, like they don't care. Google doesn't care, Like they just want to have a good page that works well. And like Webflow outputs like high quality HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So there's really no issues when it comes to using one or the other, or even mixed CMSs, depending on what you're doing. That's what a lot of sites do.
So is this kind of like taking some of the simplicity from Wix and Squarespace, but making it into a more kind of commercial, professional application here?
I would say like Squarespace and Wix, they're more like Canva, and Webflow is more like Photoshop. So it's
Photoshop's quite complicated. There's a learning curve to it.
It's not a simple tool. But the thing is, like, if you've already been using all these advanced settings in GenerateBlocks and so on, like you already know like how to use padding, margins, borders, etc. And these same things translate. So it's not like you have to start over and relearn everything. You just have to kind of like deepen a little bit your skill set. But that gets you a much better output in the end, and you get speed in exchange as well. So it's not too bad. If you're starting from scratch, though, it's a lot to learn. It's a lot to pick up. If you have never done...
Is there good places to learn, like YouTube channels that kind of support the ecosystems?
The tutorials on Webflow on their YouTube channel is the best tutorial I've ever seen on the internet. It's actually funny. It's like they actually like make like there's like ongoing jokes and everything. I've watched the whole thing. I didn't need to, but I did watch it anyway. And it's like 15 videos or something. So it's like, it did take some commitment, but it was so well written and so well done that I actually watched the whole thing. It's like, you can do that in an afternoon. It's not like super long. But you'll know how to build a basic page after that. And it's really, really good. Their YouTube channel is excellent. Now, if you want to learn GenerateBlocks, there's a YouTube channel called the Admin Bar that is really good. That will show you a bunch of tricks. And for Bricks, so there is the guy who actually runs Automatic.css and Frames, the two tools that I showed you that kind of like compete with the Relume and stuff. He is called Kevin Geary, and he makes lots of live streams. My problem with his videos is he tends to ramble a lot, like us. so it's like, it's less to the point, and I don't love it for learning, to be honest.
Okay. So imagine yourself now as a fortune teller.
Okay.
What does the CMS landscape look like in 5 years? Because it kind of feels like we're going through a lot of change right now. Like, do you see it settling down, or this change getting like more intense and faster?
First of all, was this an AI generated question? Because it sounds like it a little bit. You don't have to answer because I know the answer is yes. And the answer is it depends of the role of websites in 5 years.
It depends. That's a classic SEO answer. Like I want you to like fortune teller wouldn't say it depends.
True.
Fortune teller would make a prediction.
We'll just make it up and just go for it.
Exactly.
My prediction is that the trends that we see today will continue, which is more and more content is consumed outside the website. It's consumed on social networks, on big platforms, etc. It's not even AI, right? It's just like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. That's where you consume your content today, much more than websites. And so as the consumption of content on website erodes, so does the competitive advantage of WordPress, because that's their CMS, right? Wherever the drama lands, I don't think changes much to this. What will change is there will be less innovation on WordPress, which kind of like will accentuate this because companies will be afraid to invest. So based on that, I think the perception that WordPress is cheaper is going to stick for a very long time. Like, it's been around for so long. Like in 5 years, most people will still think, oh, it's a free CMS, therefore it's cheaper, which I think is wrong at this point. But people will still think that. So will WordPress still be dominant? Yeah, I think so. But instead of maybe 80%, it might be 70 or 65% of market share. Yeah, and then it really depends as well. Think about it. If websites get less traffic, people will build less websites, right? Which means the ecosystem we have today is essentially not that far from what we'll probably have in 5 years, minus whatever companies went under and the few companies that created websites. So that also would mean that WordPress would not regress too much in market share, not necessarily because they're amazing, but because people just haven't changed their website because they're less important in their marketing.
So you don't think it's going to change too much, essentially?
No, but it's like, what most people do is not necessarily the right thing to do. And I think that's something that's important to say. I think most people are wrong on thinking that essentially this is a cheap, better platform. It's just people always do like they've always done without questioning things. And this is like, now it's starting to change, and alternatives are becoming more and more viable, especially as people are going to slow down their development in WordPress.
Okay. So if there's anyone who's listening who's now convinced by your arguments here, what's their game plan for migrating?
So I would probably do something similar to what I talked about for our site, which don't rebuild your website after listening to this podcast. Building your website takes a very long time and doesn't necessarily move the needle a lot.
And I think that's an important thing to say, because we've done this probably more times than most. We need to rebuild the website, and like everything in the business kind of stops until this is done. Yeah. And actually it doesn't really move the needle that much.
Exactly.
So it's probably not going to fix things if it's if the underlying business is fundamentally broken, right?
So what I'm looking at is using Webflow for new pages, new products, opt-in pages, like key pages in the business. That's $14 per month if you take the yearly plan. That's what we're looking at. And using Relume once in a while, I pay $30, 2-3 times in a year when I'm building pages like that, right? It's like, that's the budget I'm looking at, so that I can start moving to this tech. I can push that page on my WordPress site with the plugin and kind of have a mix of both, where my key pages...
Just to interrupt there, the WordPress plugin lets you select which pages should essentially route to WordPress and which should route to Webflow. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say I'm rebuilding the homepage on Webflow. I can push that live, and then the rest of the site is still served by WordPress.
Okay. And so, I mean, that seems pretty easy to do that then.
It's also like an easy transition. Like, it's like there's low pressure. You kind of build things one per one, and eventually, if you wanted, your whole site could be overtaken by Webflow if you keep building on it. That's kind of like one day maybe you have a project of like sunsetting the WordPress pages, and then you kind of like move everything, and that's it. You have your website rebuilt, except you haven't stopped everything for 6 months to do that. So my recommendation, if you want to try things, is to do that. The problem with bricks is that you need to change your whole WordPress theme, which breaks your site. So it's really for new projects, whereas this is a much more subtle way of approaching things. I think that's why you didn't push against it when I showed this. It's because essentially we can, going forward, I'm going to try to build a system there.
That's a little bit counterintuitive then, because you're like, oh, bricks is on WordPress, so it's like closer to what you have.
Yeah, it's actually more difficult.
But actually, to implement that, it's a lot further away because you need to rebuild the whole site. Whereas with
if you don't
Webflow, you can just build one page if you want and switch that one.
And
page.
GenerateBlocks is good, but it can be limited. Or you're gonna need to resort to custom code. Like the new website, there's quite a bit of custom code because of the hitting the limits in GenerateBlocks, for example. So that's the way I'm looking at it. So this way we'll keep the CMS for a while. It means we don't have the cost argument. Like we're basically adding a $14 per month subscription on top of what we have, but we gain all the flexibility without having to rebuild everything, which to me is worth that price. And also makes A/B testing simpler and all the things that I was complaining about with WordPress, because it's served by Webflow and you can connect these tools to Webflow directly.
Excellent. Well, is there any questions I haven't asked you about this that I should have, Gil?
Is that an AI question too? Or,
no, that's my own question. That's like my signature final question. Every time I interview someone, I ask that.
Okay. No, I think that's mostly it. I mean, I think we went through it, the WordPress drama, the fact that you need to pay for a lot of plugins to make a WordPress site be essentially competitive. You don't have to pay for this, but yeah, when you get competitive, it is important. And yeah, it's like in general, I think you should definitely be looking at Webflow, even if you have a WordPress website. Mostly if you're selling products or services. If you're just blogging, WordPress is fine. And even the free version of GenerateBlocks is also fine. You don't need anything else. It's still pretty decent. I mean, the current website is basically all GenerateBlocks. And I think we've still done an okay job on it, even though I get frustrated when I hit walls.
Great. Well, we certainly covered a lot in that episode. If you've been listening on audio and you want to see any of this in action, head on over to YouTube to watch the video version of this podcast. And while you're there, why not leave us a comment and let us know what you think about all this WordPress
Which one
drama?
do you pick?
Yeah. Which are you going to make? Are you going to make any changes based on this? We're interested to hear what you guys out there are thinking of. Okay, we'll wrap it up there then. We'll be back in another 2 weeks. So make sure you drop a like on this video if you're watching it, subscribe to the channel, leave us a rating on your favorite podcast
and
system or player, wherever you send us a gift. What do you want gifts for?
I don't know. I got socks one day. Like a subscriber sent me socks one time. So, you know, it happens.
Do not send us gifts, please.
Do not send us used socks, especially. Anyway, thanks for listening and see you next time. Bye-bye.